While Americans across the country mourn the victims of the attacks of 9/11, many are dissatisfied with the U.S. government's recent decisions to withdraw its military from Afghanistan, which put an end to the 20-year war in the region. The withdrawal of U.S. soldiers and military personnel officially ended on August 30th, after more than a year and a half of evacuations. This ended the 20-year war that was waged against the Taliban, the Islamic fundamentalist group believed to have been protecting Osama bin Laden and other prominent leaders of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, who were responsible for the 9/11 attacks. The war in Afghanistan began in 2001 when the U.S. military under the command of President George W. Bush invaded and occupied the country for 20 years as a retaliation for the 9/11 attacks. While the vast majority of the United States government and the American mainstream media favored the war initially, 20 years later, the attitude towards the war changed significantly amongst the American public, as many politicians and media figures criticized the Bush administration's decision to invade Afghanistan. One such critic of the war was Erik Edstrom, who is a retired U.S. Army infantry captain, Boston resident, and the author of Un-American, A Soldier's Reckoning with America's Longest War, which is a critically acclaimed book about the war's failure and detrimental effect on America's societal militarism. Edstrom, who watched the 9/11 attacks from his high school class, was motivated to attend the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where he joined the Army. He served as a presidential escort platoon leader in Kandahar, Afghanistan, under the leadership of President Obama, where he was inspired to write his critically acclaimed book about the war.
I was in Kandahar province in the south, which was a very violent and dangerous province to be in. It was primarily well known for being sort of the IED capital of Afghanistan. So rather than getting shot at quite frequently, it was all about homemade explosives, anti-personnel mines, and the rest. Jerry-rigged pressure cookers filled with nails and bicycle chain and homemade explosives that would blow up as a fragmentation charge. Wow. So it was that sort of an experience. It was about the fourth day of patrolling. So within the first week of being at the final sort of fob that I was operating out of, I had one of my trucks get blown up and had 4 injured soldiers within the first week. And within the first 4 months, about 25% of my platoon had become combat casualties. It was basically just a recursive loop where the U.S. would try to maintain control over the road and the nearby villages. And it was so difficult to do that there was no hope of any sort of more lofty ideals of winning over people. The people I engaged with often didn't want us there, or they wanted us there to take American money as a part of contracts so that they could advance their own power. There was not any sort of broad brush goodwill for having the U.S. in their country. Many of the villages where we would try to set up small outposts and live in mud shacks didn't want us there, because wherever the U.S. goes, they expect that the Taliban will come too, and therefore, create conflict in their small village or town. So we were not very welcome. That is, unless you were paying contractors, Afghan contractors, who often had good, cozy relationships with various warlords, guilty of human rights abuses, but America was happy to overlook that so long as we had somebody that would help us. And basically, like for instance with the road situation, you would pay a contractor to rebuild the road after it had been blown up by an IED, and the contractor would pay a tribute back to the Taliban for protection so that they're not going to get killed for doing work of the U.S. And therefore, the Taliban then uses that money that was the part of the tribute to buy more bomb-making materials and then blow up the road again, which then enables this contracting company more work. So they, they fix the road, the U.S. pays them, and then they give more money to the Taliban, who buys more bomb-making materials and blows up the road again. Meanwhile, in that process, blowing up U.S. soldiers over and over and over again on these roads in Kandahar. And it was just a closed circuit loop, and there was absolutely zero positive impact coming from that experience.
Edstrom is currently working on bringing United States military personnel as well as Afghan allies and refugees back to the United States to safety. He is hoping that through his book, he could help educate the American public on the negative and detrimental effects of the war in Afghanistan.